Welcome to the Burn Your Mortgage Podcast, a Canadian real estate podcast that shows you how to pay off your mortgage sooner and live well while doing it. Now, here's your host, Sean Cooper.
Welcome to the Burn Your Mortgage Podcast. I'm Sean Cooper, and it's great to be back for another episode. On today's show, I'll be talking to Mark Seed. Mark is passionate about personal finance and investing and is the blogger behind My Own Advisor. Mark is currently investing in dividend-paying stocks and low-cost ETFs on his journey to financial freedom. In my interview with Mark, we discuss key considerations when deciding to leave one home for another, decluttering your home when downsizing, and Mark's top mortgage burning tips. Without further ado, here's my interview with Mark Seed. Hi, Mark. How are you doing today?
Good, Sean. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. So I'd like to start off by asking you, what are some key considerations when deciding whether it makes sense to leave one home for another? Because I understand you have some experience with that.
Yeah, for sure. And again, thanks for having me on the podcast, Sean. It's nice to chat with you. You know, a lot of things go into whether or not you want to leave one home for the other. I think for us, whether it's owning versus renting or for our recent decisions, we can talk a little bit more on the podcast tonight. Downsizing from our current single-family bungalow into a condo, it's really a lifestyle choice. And although I can only speak from my own experiences and myself, there's lots of convenience that go with a condo. Obviously, there's a cost sometimes with condo fees and the like. We also used to live in a semi-detached home in the south of Ottawa as well. We weren't sure if we were going to start a family or not, my wife and I. So we stayed there for a few years. And then we've been in the bungalow now for about 8 years now because we wanted a little bit more space, a little bit more quiet space out of the city. But a lot of the things that we thought about were, how much space do you really need and why? And we recognize that we don't really need as much space as we think we need. How much time and maintenance are you willing to put into your home? For those that have kids, are you close to amenities, kids' schools, etc.? What's your commute like? Do you want to be on the road all the time? That kind of stuff. What's your car situation like? You're going to put a lot of money into one car, two cars, and how long-term and sustainable is that? So, lots of things we could talk about, and certainly we could chat about those today. But I would say there's always trade-offs with housing, and you really need to think through some of those decisions for you and your family.
It definitely it was one of your concern about selling your current property with what's going on in the market, if you could get good value for that. And I've always heard the saying in real estate, it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market, as Scott McGillivray has said. So I'm just curious, was that a concern at all for yourself? I guess if the market is balanced or sellers or buyers market, you're kind of selling and buying in the same market. So it kind of seems irrelevant to me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wash from that perspective. And, I have to be honest, been looking at the housing market in Ottawa of late, it's been trending slowly upward. It certainly hasn't been a boom like it has been in the Greater Toronto area, the GTA, or, the Greater Vancouver area. I think, and again, I don't have all my facts in front of me, but you've probably seen some peaks and valleys in the Calgary market. Montreal, I think, has been slowly taking off over recent years. And so Ottawa's kind of, I wouldn't say it's flatlined by any means, but it's probably inching slowly upward year over year. It's largely a function of the decent economy here in the city, government work, government contract work, et cetera, an emerging tech sector again. So lots of good reasons why the economy is probably pretty good in Ottawa, but it wasn't really a factor for us about moving or not. It was really more of a lifestyle choice. And for all the reasons that, I just mentioned in terms of how much space do you really need, what's the next phase of our life in terms of maybe semi-retirement in another 5 to 10 years, we were really thinking all those things through. And we recognized that, 1,200 square feet for two people is probably plenty of space. I grew up in something similar with my sister and my two parents and a dog, and we only have 1,300 square feet. And, we did just fine. And you don't certainly need a McMansion to be happy, although I can appreciate people do put pride and value into a larger home sometimes too.
Totally. And that's a great point that you make, because I wrote a blog post a while back about how half as many people in Canada are living in houses, but the houses have doubled in size over the last 30 or 40 years, I believe. So it seems to me that Canadians seem to love these big houses, but I'm glad that you recognized and took the time to ask yourself that question. Do I really need all that space? Because I certainly see that in my own situation. I could live upstairs myself, but do I really need 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms for one person when I'm not even home that often to begin with? So I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, that's exactly it for us. I mean, we have a 3 bedroom home. We really enjoy it here, but there are, a couple of rooms that we actually don't use very much. And there's, a nicely partially finished basement that we have that I'm not down there, but once a few times in the winter for, riding my bike and watching the hockey games or entertaining friends. So at the end of the day, I think it's really important for people to kind of take a step back, look at some of the objective value that they're getting out of their home, whether they're renting, whether they want to buy. And really sit down and be honest with yourself about what you need, because I think you'll be surprised at the answer.
Now, Mark, you made the excellent point that housing decisions are not just financial ones. They're often a range of emotions and lifestyle decisions involved. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for those folks that want to visit my site, we can provide some of those particulars later on, Sean. I wrote a 3-part series on my site regarding this housing dilemma, and I kind of wrestled with the whole idea in terms of moving back into the city and downsizing. And it didn't come easy because we do enjoy the space and the land and the neighbors and the community that we're in right now. But at the end of the day, while money is important and it's a good tool, and it's obviously a good tool to use wisely, it isn't all about money. And so as we get older, we're now in our mid 40s. We're really genuinely starting to appreciate our time and value our time, whether it's doing things on our own through hobbies, doing things with our friends, spending time with our family, meeting new people in terms of communities or activities outside of work. And so we're gaining a far better appreciation, probably a lot more than maybe we should have had in our 30s. But we're getting a better appreciation for what is our time worth and how best to spend it. And so in moving back to the city, one of the things that we've been thinking about is, again, I mentioned earlier, going down to one car. And so we don't have to worry about shuttling the extra car around for maintenance and winter tire rotations and all other fun stuff. The other benefits of where we bought, and you keep hearing location is really important, but we are, albeit a 5-minute walk or 10-minute walk at the very most, if we were leisurely, to groceries, to our pharmacy. I'm 15 minutes away from any restaurants that we want to entertain ourselves at and the like. So we're very close within walking distance of all those things. And when we don't need the car, we obviously won't take it. We can walk everywhere. We can bike everywhere. And so the ability to walk to groceries, to walk to restaurants, to even walk to our employment, which is only 15 or 20 minutes up the road, it'll really simplify our lives, but it'll also give us back some of the nice things about being in that location in terms of getting some exercise and wanting to walk and bike and basically live in the city a little bit more. Those are things that we can't necessarily do right here. So again, really much a lifestyle choice, back to where we were, about 14 years ago. But yeah, certainly life isn't all about money. Money's a great tool, but you really want to think about kind of what value that your house may offer and what amenities and services may be in your area as well.
Yeah, that was certainly a big consideration with where I purchased my property, because I don't own a vehicle myself, so I wanted to be within walking distance of, as you mentioned, restaurants and other amenities like a supermarket, and ended up buying in Scarborough, which is part of Toronto, but I'm in an older part of Scarborough where it's old-fashioned. It's not as much urban sprawl as people kind of picture the rest of Scarborough. So it's kind of more like the beach area of Toronto, if any of the listeners know that. But I really like how the stores are close together, and I'm a 10-minute bus ride from the subway. So certainly when I was buying my property, those were important things, because I wasn't planning to buy a vehicle anytime soon. And this area pretty much has everything that I need. And I could pretty much see this as my forever home and forever neighborhood, if that's a term.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely a term, and I think kudos to you for, like we've talked about, really recognizing kind of what you value in your home or where you want to live, and kind of putting the financial decisions aside to a point and making sure you've kind of got those priorities in order, and then you can maybe do the math and figure out where you're going to get your most bang for your buck to marry up that value.
Great. So you looked at both living in the city and staying on the outskirts of town. Talk about some of the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, so definitely, around the amenities, that was important. We do need to drive a short distance to amenities now. So again, going down to one car will be absolutely great in the city. And maybe long term, we won't even have a car at all. But, we feel with our cold Ottawa winters, that's probably a pretty big priority to be able to get around when it's minus 30 or more below.
Yeah, definitely.
Entertainment value is important too. We do go to restaurants. We do enjoy the VIP cinemas from time to time. I'm a big fan of Ottawa Red Blacks, our CFL team here in Ottawa. So I have seasons tickets. And so the ability to kind of walk to the game and walk home after the game and not worry about the bus if I don't want to, or worry about, driving home later at night or those types of things. Those are all kind of things that we thought of in terms of like I said, a next phase lifestyle where hopefully within 5 or 10 years of full-time work, we can consider part-time jobs or just working on our hobbies and passions and volunteering some other time. So for all the other reasons and more, I think that's really where we landed with the condo decision, and we're pretty excited about it. Lots of things to do here and lots of things to consider for the condo, but overall, I think it's going to be a very positive change for us.
Great, and that's a perfect segue to my next question. Now, as you alluded to, you ended up deciding to downsize to a condo. Can you walk us through your thought process? Why was this a good decision for your wife and you? And what are some key considerations when other people are looking to downsize similar to yourself?
I'll pick up where I left off in terms of the last response. In terms of, I think money matters to a point. You don't necessarily want, in my opinion, all your assets tied up in real estate. While it'll be okay to have some of your money in real estate, and whether it's your principal residence or a secondary place in terms of a rental or maybe a summer home, or for those that are doing quite well. That's great, but I really consider a house as a place to live, and you got to live somewhere. And it's nice if the house appreciates in value over time, for sure. But ultimately, everybody needs a roof over their head. And so, when we were looking at downsize, we were kind of looking at the rooms of our house and figuring, what do we really need to live in? And we want a nice kitchen, and we need a decent bedroom and a living space and those types of things. And other than that, we really don't need much. And so that was a big decision to downsize. We don't really use a lot of the space in our current home, yet we're paying for it. We're putting heat through the ducts for it. We're pumping the air conditioning this summer because it's brutally warm and humid in Ottawa tonight. And we're fortunate to have a nice irrigation system for our house, but we've got to service that every year. And so, we don't really want to be in the dilemma of a house rich or cash poor position. We really want some of our assets spread around through, our TFSAs, our RSPs, our real estate, maybe our pension at work and the stuff. So when we're looking at our kind of whole portfolio, those were some of the considerations. And obviously looking at a lot of the expenses that are flowing through this bungalow, we may or may not have them in the condo, or at least they'll be totally offset by the condo fees, where we're not servicing a lot of the things here. We're just doing it on a much smaller scale in the condo. So it did take some math, and I know it scares a lot of people doing the math, but it is an important exercise to go through sometimes.
Yeah, because I'm sure you can speak from personal experience, but it can get quite costly to be a homeowner. I mean, I could speak from just a few events this year, like at the end of last year, my dishwasher ended up breaking and flooding through to the basement. And then there was a couple of windstorms in Toronto that tore shingles off my roof. And then the wood out front of my house that's holding up the garden is rotting, and that's going to cost hundreds or thousands of dollars to fix. So I'm sure you can speak from personal experience, but owning a home can certainly be costly. And I guess it's just nice when you're getting closer to retirement not to have to stress about stuff like waterproofing the house or getting all these major renovations done.
Yeah, I can go through a quick inventory. Like, since we've moved here 8 years ago, we put on a fairly industrial steel metal roof, which is good for the home value, but very costly for us from a capital perspective, more than your typical asphalt and tar shingles. We put in some window wells here as recently as this summer. Our fridge broke, so we had to replace that because A, we needed a good fridge, and B, we wanted something decent when we sell the house eventually. We have an HRV, which is a heat recovery ventilation system to kind of bring in cooler air and make sure we reduce the humidity to a modest level over time. So there's all these kind of capital expenses that you have to think about as a homeowner, and whether you're waterproofing or window wells or you're replacing fridges or dishwashers break, you do have to think about your kind of life cycle with the appliances in the home, the maintenance of the home, and then like I said, just the usual day-to-day utilities. Hydro is probably not going to go down in value. Water bills will continue to be fairly costly over time. depending on your telco situation, you may have Netflix or other things. They're fairly cheap, but again, those prices probably won't stay the same for forever. So all these kind of things that you enjoy in terms of creature comforts or anything in terms of maintenance or any capital outlays, you kind of have to think about how long you're going to be in the house and are you willing to pony up the money, because home ownership isn't necessarily cheap.
Definitely, Ed. I was just curious, in terms of all those expenses for your home over the years, have you come up with some sort of system to budget for them ahead of time? Like, do you take a walk around your house and say to yourself, well, I think the roof's going to need to be replaced soon. Looks like the fridge is making some noises. It might need to be replaced soon. I'm just curious if you have some sort of system like that. I'm trying to figure that out myself, but I haven't had much luck.
Yeah, well, you know what I've actually did, and it's not overly scientific, is when we had our house inspection, we actually were fortunate to have a pretty good guy, and he was fairly thorough, and he kind of did a walk about the house. He obviously checked the electrical and looked at our well and septic system, and it was pretty thorough. And he gave us a pretty comprehensive book. And one of the things I did after we moved into the house is I kind of went through that book and I looked at some of the notes he made, and he says, okay, well, you may want to get some window wells in because it looks like there'll be some water corrupting around your house, and say, okay, well, there's a few grand that we'll need to invest in that. And I already mentioned the roof, so we want to make that change because any new homeowner that buys our house will be fortunate to have basically a forever roof, a steel metal roof that's warranted for 40 years or more. So we did the math, and what I did is I went through the book and I basically put a dollar value to some of those things. And what we were able to do with my wife is we're to say, okay, we had to prioritize which is more important, which would be one of these things that we do, and how are we going to be basically starting to fund this house maintenance fund. And we've been fortunate over the years where we haven't had to go into a lot of debt to service some of the big capital outlays. We've tried to save in advance for some of these things. And where we couldn't, we borrowed some money temporarily, but we paid it off quite quickly, knowing that obviously paying debt is paying someone else first, and you're not paying yourself. So we're very cautious about how much borrowing we would do and over a short period of time for any improvements. And we basically keep a fairly healthy cash emergency fund right now in a high interest savings account, because we know things like fridges will break down and dishwashers will need repairs and some pumps will fail and that kind of stuff. And so we want to keep a bit of money in there, because if and when they happen, the last thing I want to be stressing about is where I'm going to find the money.
Great. So since you'll be living in a smaller place, as you mentioned, downsizing to a condo, you'll more likely need a lot less stuff. Any advice for decluttering your home?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, we've been on a bit of a purge mode actually right now. And I think, to be honest, lists help. My wife is, she works in strategy at a national not-for-profit organization, and she's very good at, organizing and lists and, having to-dos and timelines for those things. So she's been great to really kind of itemize, what is it that we can get rid of? What can we sell on Kijiji? What can we sell on Used Ottawa? Is there anything we can give away to friends or gift to family? Ask family members what they need and what they may like, and you'd be surprised what kind of pops up here in the garage or in the basement that they may need or want, or they can use for their kids, moving out of their house or whatever. So we've been doing all those things over the last year. We've made a list. We've put some timelines against what we should sell and why we should get rid of it. And we haven't used it in 5 years, then maybe it should go on the list and that kind of stuff. Put stuff on Kijiji. We've had some good success with that on some small items. We've asked family members if they want anything. We'll be asking family members yet again and friends in the new year, I'm sure, if they want anything. In terms of actually selling stuff online, what I really find is do some research, like some quick searches on those resale sites. And if you really want it gone, basically offer about 5 to 10% less than what everybody else is honoring. And to be honest, you'll probably find it disappear out of your place within a few days. If not more than a week. So that way you have less hassles to deal with, you have less emails to answer, and at the end of the day, it is money, it is just a bit of a tool. You got to think about your opportunity costs and how much your time is worth running around trying to find a buyer for something for $10 more. It's probably not worth it.
As the saying goes, one person's trash is another person's treasure. A few years ago, I was moving from living with my mother in her basement, and I was moving to the house that I'm living at now, and I just didn't want to take a ton of stuff with me. And it amazed me that I went on eBay and all these people were spending all this money on Star Wars action figures and memorabilia. And I remember I hadn't touched it in like 5 years, and it ended up selling all these action figures and made over $500. So certainly don't just assume that nobody wants your old stuff. There's probably a market for it somewhere on the World Wide Web.
Yeah, totally. And you'd be surprised what people want. It's always worth posting something and seeing it sells. And we're also passionate about, trying to donate things to the extent possible, right? We recognize there's a lot of people in need, people that would be gladly take some gently used clothes or furniture items. And so where we can, it's not that we post everything online. We do try to donate things where we can because, we recognize people are just starting out or may have fallen on hard times. And I think it's always important to consider those people that may be less fortunate than you and make sure you try to give back where you can.
Great. So you're also somebody who aspires to burn your mortgage. What are some of your best mortgage burning tips for reaching financial freedom sooner?
Yeah, well, I haven't written a book about it like you, Sean, but I do practice some of the tips that were absolutely outlined in your Burn Your Mortgage book, and you definitely got some great press for these tactics, and you accomplished it on your own. So kudos to you.
Thanks.
Definitely accelerate your mortgage payments. We go bi-weekly accelerated. There's various terms for it, but I would consider trying to go for your bi-weekly, your 26 payments a year, or even your 52 payments a year, your weekly payments, instead of something monthly. The monthly interest does add up, and I think if you can break that down into a more manageable chunk, align it with your payment schedule from work, if that's bi-weekly or weekly, that would be something I would strongly consider you to do. Shrink your amortization period. Instead of going with what the banks may offer you or the financial institutions, could be 25 years, could be 20 years, maybe do some math and see if you can go with 15. Yes, your payments may be a little bit higher, but my goodness, you're going to save potentially thousands of dollars on interest payments, and those thousands of dollars eventually find their way back into your pocket. I would encourage you to make lump sum payments. We've been doing this over the years periodically. Typically put $1,000 at a time. If we got a bonus from work, we're fortunate to do that. We put $1,000 down or $2,000 down in any given year, and it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but again, it can really cut some of those hard-earned dollars that you would be paying an interest payment off your mortgage. I think rounding up your mortgage payments is easy. You can even play some games with that in terms of your savings rate. So you go out and you spend dinner and you think you're going to spend $100 and you actually only spend 89 or $76. Well, then take the difference and throw it into your savings account or your emergency fund. You can use the same concept when you're rounding up your mortgage payments. So say your statement comes through and you should be paying the 869 or 756 or whatever it may be bi-weekly, then just round it up to an even $900 or $800 and you'll be mortgage free that much sooner. And then where possible, consider refinancing if the math makes sense. So maybe talk to a mortgage broker, get them to run some numbers for you. There's tons of online tools and calculators out there. Mortgage rates have been historically low. We know they're inching up over time, but if you've been locked into a very long term and a very high rate, you never know. It may be worth refinancing, and you don't know if you don't ask.
That's a great point, because at the time that we're recording this, you can get prime minus a full 1%, but perhaps when you signed up for your variable rate mortgage, it was only 50 basis points. So don't just assume because you have a variable rate mortgage, you can't save money. There are always different options out there. So certainly I encourage you to phone up a mortgage broker and just kind of periodically check in with them and see if there is a way to help you save money, because the economy and the mortgage market is always changing. So it doesn't hurt to have a yearly check-in with your broker and see if there's a way that you could be paying down your mortgage sooner and keeping more of your hard-earned money in your pocket where it belongs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing is it doesn't hurt to ask. And if you don't know, a lot of terms there, variable rate mortgages, fixed rate, closed terms, open terms, it's okay not to know all the details. I would strongly encourage folks to reach out to a mortgage broker. There's lots of them around. They will gladly take, some of your business. They get paid by the financial institutions that lend the money. Look at various calculators. Google can absolutely be your friend in this regard, and look and see, where you can potentially save some money through a refinancing. It's not to say it's a hard and fast rule that has to be done, but it's just one of those many options that are in your toolbox.
Great. Well, Mark, it's been wonderful having you on the show today. Before I let you go, is there anything of interest that you're working on that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I'm always working on the blog, Sean. So my blog is myownadvisor.ca. Quick Google search should come up in one of the top searches there. I'm always working on posting, my perspectives on personal finance and investing, whether that's some of the favorite ETFs that are great to own in terms of low cost exchange traded funds that can put even more money in your pocket, other than all those mortgage tips I just hopefully mentioned. I talk about my dividend investing journey in terms of how my wife and I are trending to a modest form of semi-retirement, or maybe some form of financial freedom in the next 5 to 10 years. I answer a bunch of reader questions as well. I recently posted an article about thinking about tons of beneficiary information regarding your TFSAs and RSPs, and really how to manage things from a tax efficient perspective, whether it's for your state or even today. And so I do talk about a whole host of personal finance and investing topics on the site. And I encourage anybody to check out the site, subscribe to the site, join the journey, ask me questions, interact with a couple thousand readers that follow the site every day. So myownadvisor.ca, and happy to interact with you.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to include that in the show notes. And that comes to the end of our show. So thanks very much, Mark, for being on the show. It was wonderful to have you.
Appreciate it, Sean. We'll do it again.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Burn Your Mortgage podcast. Besides being a podcast host and money coach, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker. If you or anyone you know, family, friends, coworkers, or neighbors could ever use any unbiased mortgage advice or a second opinion, feel free to reach out. You can reach me by email at seancooperwriter@gmail.com, or you can call or text me at 647-867-3711. Also, be sure to head on over to www.seancooperwriter.com and sign up for my free weekly newsletter. As a small token of my appreciation, you'll be able to download my ultimate mortgage checklist on choosing the perfect mortgage. You can also sign up for a free one-on-one 15-minute money coaching consultation with yours truly. I look forward to hearing from you and helping you burn your mortgage sooner too. Once again, thanks for listening.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Mortgage podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating. Until next time, happy mortgage burning.